Blending families could be one of the scariest and most uncertain times in any relationship. How are my kids going to feel about my partner? How are my partner's kids going to feel about me? So many questions, right? Well, for Darren and Angie Galsworthy, it was pretty smooth sailing. Then there is the question of how will the kids feel about their new step-siblings? This is not such a smooth transition in this story, and it would end up with dire consequences. Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. Truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so because it really helps me out and I really appreciate it. We're really growing and it's all thanks to you guys and I really appreciate you for that. You have no idea. So, Darren Galsworthy. When Darren was 18 years old, he was dating a woman by the name of Angela. They would end up marrying, but the marriage would only last for about 3 years, and he says it was just a case of too far, too fast. During this time, though, he would babysit for the kids of one of his friends from time to time. So one day he heads over to his friend's house to babysit, and that's when he would run into the friend's other babysitter, which must be so nice, right? Oh, don't worry, our second babysitter is going to come and relieve you, our first babysitter. A woman by the name of Angie. He would describe in his book an electricity that ran through his body when he met her. But he was married to Angela at the time. When Darren and Angela finally divorced, Angie was already seeing someone. And then by 1986, she was pregnant with her son, Nathan Matthews. After Darren and Angela divorced, Darren would have a few girlfriends here and there, but nothing ever serious. He was 22 at the time, and he was way too focused on his career to think about having a serious relationship. Then at the age of 29, he would meet a 22-year-old girl by the name of Tanya Watts. Tanya actually worked at a nursing home at the time. The two would meet at a local pub one night, and before they knew it, they were in like a full-blown relationship. Because they always had so many problems, they never chose to marry, though. Then on February 19th, 1985, Tanya and Darren would welcome their first child together, a little boy that the couple would name Danny. Darren adored Danny, and he was an excellent father. But as proven time and time again, a child does not fix a relationship. Say it with me for the people in the back. A child does not fix a relationship, I promise you. The couple continued to fight daily for hours at a time and fling the most hurtful comments that they could at each other. So eventually they decided that it was time for them to go their separate ways for the sake of Danny. It was better for them to be apart and stop the arguing in front of him. Fast forward to a Saturday night in October of 1997. Darren is laying in his bed with Danny when Tanya knocks at the door. He opens the door and he expects Tanya to start screaming at him, right? But to his surprise, that wasn't the case at all. The two got to chatting, and before they knew it, they were fully engaged in sexual activities. Tanya was out of the house the next morning before the sun even came up, and as soon as Darren woke up, he regretted the entire thing. Then, a few months later, a few of Tanya's girlfriends would get in touch with Darren to let him know that Tanya was pregnant and that he was the father. So let me just stop here. This type of information should have come from Tanya, not Tanya's friends. And to be honest, I think it speaks to her maturity level at the time. June 3rd, 1998. While at work, Darren gets a call from Tanya's friends to let him know that she had given birth to a little girl named Rebecca, or Becky for short. Darren and Danny hurried over to the hospital to meet the new addition to the family. Darren says the first time he met Becky, he fell completely head over heels in love with her. He also says that he very much questioned if Becky was even his daughter because it was a one-night stand, but it only takes one time, you know? But he knew that he couldn't afford a DNA test, and Tanya made it clear to him that if he did not accept Rebecca as his daughter, then he would lose Danny as well. With his back against the wall, he chose to accept that Becky was his child and raise her and love her as such. When Becky was about 6 months old, Darren was out with her and Danny when he would run into Angie, the other babysitter. He says that the second he saw her, the same rush of electricity came flooding back to him. The two chatted for a bit about how adorable his children were, and he got the chance to let her know that he was once again single. But just like so many times before, Angie was in a relationship. It was another case of wrong time for this couple that clearly wanted to be together so very badly. A few months later, Darren was in a pub having a drink after work when who walks in but Angie. He walked over to her, sat down, and asked if he could buy her and her friends some drinks. Angie would later confess to him that things with her boyfriend were on the rocks and that she had actually come to the pub that night purposely hoping to run into him. A few weeks later, Angie finally broke up with her boyfriend and the stars would align for these two. Angie's last relationship was extremely toxic, so she decided it best to have her son stay with her mom during the week and spend the weekends with her. The current relationship that Angie had just gotten out of was very, very toxic. So while she was in that relationship, she decided that it would be best if Nathan stayed with her mother during the week and then spent the weekends with her. But now that she was with Darren, who was a good guy, she still kept Nathan at mom's house because his friends were there, his school was there, and she didn't want to interrupt that. So he would come over on the weekends. She would still see Nathan, though, every single day for at least 20 minutes because she would walk him to and from school. And because 12-year-old Nathan never had a father figure in his life, Darren felt that it was extremely important for him to form a good bond with Nathan and to be the father figure that he had essentially been robbed of, basically. So the two would go over to Angie's mom's house to pick Nathan up. When they got back to Angie's house, he would say that it would take a few hours of roughhousing for Nathan to warm up to him, but once he did, the two would form a pretty good bond. Next up are Darren's children, 4-year-old Danny and 2-year-old Becky. Both Danny and Becky took to Angie almost immediately, and their relationship with her would only grow stronger from there. Becky was much too young to play with Nathan, so she would spend most of her time with Angie and her father, while Nathan slowly took Danny under his wing, and the two would spend hours in their room playing video games together. From that point on, Danny and Angie made it their mission to give these 3 kids the best life that they possibly could. It was also around this time that Darren decided to go ahead with the DNA test since Tanya still hadn't put his name on the birth certificate. Not that it mattered to him either way, he was head over heels in love with his baby girl. But the results determined that Becky was indeed the daughter of Darren. Darren and Angie would have the kids every single weekend, but they began to notice some odd behavior from Darren's kids whenever they would arrive at the house. They would always be extremely excited when their dad and Angie pulled up to get them, But when they got back to the house, the two would be very quiet, sometimes for hours. When Darren tried to speak to Tanya about the kid's strange new behavior, he was met with a nasty comment along the lines of, maybe they don't like being with you and your new family. That wasn't the case, and Darren knew that. It was September of 2001. Danny's 5 and Becky is 3 when there's a knock at the door. Darren opens the door and he's met with a social worker by the name of Dave. Dave is there to let Darren know that his children have been taken into custody over concerning behaviors that are being exhibited by their mother. Extremely confused, Darren is concerned, obviously, about his children, and he begs for social services to give him the kids, to which they inform him that the children have to stay in their custody until they're able to determine the best placement for them. But in the meantime, he advises Darren that he will be able to apply for custody. He also let him know that he would still have his weekend visits granted to him. But in regard to permanent homing, it would take a number of court cases to determine the best placement for the children. It would break Darren and Angie's hearts when they would have to give the kids back on a Sunday night. Remember, we're talking about children that are 5 and 3 here. They don't understand anything, and they are constantly asking, why can't we live with you and Angie? And when it was time to drop them off, the kids would walk to the door slowly with their heads hung really low. It would take until March of 2002 for Angie and Darren to win sole physical custody of the children and finally put an end to this nightmare. After Darren and Angie were able to put everything behind them, Darren spent way more money than he had, buying the kids everything that they would want, from new beds, new furniture, to toys, to nights out, to trips. He didn't care about any of the money that was being spent. All he cared about was putting this nightmare behind him and keeping the kids happy. As time went on, Danny and Nathan would get along just fine, but Nathan always saw Becky as a nuisance. And again, remember, he's 10 years older than her. So, be it the huge age gap between them or the fact that his mom, Angie, and Becky had grown incredibly close. Becky would even begin to call Angie my Angie, and this infuriated Nathan, who was a teen at the time. He would tell his mother on a consistent basis that he didn't want Becky to live with her and that he felt that Becky didn't respect her. However, this was not how Angie felt whatsoever. She loved Becky like her own, and she treated her as such. Angie and Darren would also dream about having their own kids together, but because Angie had an ectopic pregnancy before, this made it extremely difficult for them to conceive. They started looking into IVF treatments, but because they were so expensive and Angie wasn't working at the time, they chose to just count their blessings for the 3 children that God has already blessed them with. By the time Becky was 5 and Danny was 7, Nathan was 16 years old, and he would often babysit the two so that Darren and Angie could go out and have a night out together, and so that Nathan can earn some pocket change, which is nice. One of the family's favorite things about where they lived in Bristol was that there were loads of family-friendly events that would be held throughout the year, and the family would frequently visit them. Nathan would even take Danny and Becky on the rides for Darren because he was too afraid to go on them himself. Becky loved any type of flowers or bugs that she could find. She loved to climb trees. She loved to fish for tadpoles in the pond. And after she caught them, she would put them into jars and she would watch them turn into frogs before taking them back down to the pond and letting them go. She loved animals so much that the family would spend many days at the Bristol Zoo and other various wildlife parks. Becky owned a terrapin, a rabbit she named Buster, 2 white rats, 2 Siberian dwarf hamsters, and 3 regular hamsters. She even designed a 3-story mansion for Buster the rabbit to live in that would take Darren a week to build for her. Because Nathan had still never formed a relationship with his father once he hit his teens, he began to look to Darren as his father figure, and Darren made it his mission to try to instill good morals, a good sense of right and wrong, and a strong work ethic into Nathan. Nathan had a huge fascination with computers, and he was actually brilliant with technology. On the weekends, Nathan and Danny would spend hours in his room playing video games and computer games. Then every once in a while, even Darren and Angie would join in. He also enjoyed riding his bike, archery, and shooting. He loved to have Darren as a sparring partner, and when Nathan turned 13, he was actually given his first air rifle. Fast forward to Nathan's 17th birthday. He asks Darren to teach him how to drive a car. And when he goes for his driving test, he would walk out the doors over to Darren with a huge smile on his face. Darren knew that he had passed, and he told him, "I'm proud of you, son." After he got his license, Nathan and Darren would begin to bond over Nathan's new obsession with fixing cars, which was also something that Darren loved to do. When Darren turned 18 years old, Darren gave Nathan a card that read, "Happy birthday, son. I'm taking you out for a pint tonight." The legal age to drink in the UK must be 18. I'm assuming. That evening, the two went to one of Darren's favorite spots, the Pied Horse. Once there, the two would spend hours drinking pints, playing darts, and shooting pool. After about 8 pints, Nathan was schmammered and stumbled home with Darren. I say all of this to say that Darren treated this kid like the father that he never had, and the way he repays him is absolutely awful. It's disgusting. It makes everything that goes down even more cold-hearted than it already is. One day when Nathan was 19 years old, Darren was outside fixing his car when all of a sudden Nathan pulls up and he has 3 girls in his car that are all around the age of 12. Darren yells at Nathan, asks him what the hell he's doing, to which he replies that the girls just wanted to go for a ride. Darren demands that he gets those girls back home immediately. So, pissed off, Nathan leaves. Nathan would end up disappearing for about 2 days after this, and when he finally returned home, he refused to talk to Darren about it. Because of this, Darren says that he was forced to chalk it up to like a sick and twisted joke that he hoped would never be repeated. I mean, yeah, except he lived in your house, so it doesn't actually matter how old he is, right? But this trend would end up being repeated just a few years later. In 2008, when Nathan was 21 years old, Darren was actually once again outside working on his car when Nathan pulls up with a girl in the front seat that is dressed very provocatively. Nathan introduces the girl in his car to Darren as his new girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. He told Darren that Shauna was 19, but Darren told him that he wasn't born yesterday and told him to get her out of here and to not bring her back until he had a birth certificate in his hand to prove what her age was. He had fought so hard to win his children back, and he refused to lose Becky over Nathan being what he feared might be predator. At the time, Danny wasn't living at the house anymore. He had gone back to live with his mother, Tanya, when he was 16 years old, although it's unclear as to why he decided to go back to her. I mean, it could be anything from they weren't getting along to, overcrowding. It doesn't actually say why. Nathan would continue dating Shauna, and then 2 years later, in 2010, Shauna would show back up to the house with a birth certificate in her hand stating that she was 16 years old, which is the legal age of consent in the UK. So that means that when Nathan first began dating Shauna, and for the 2 years following, she was 14 and he was 21. Becky was 12 years old at this time. Shauna had a rough childhood. She was one of 8 children, and she was put into foster care for a period of time before she was finally returned home to her mom. After they began getting serious, Shauna would start to flirt with other men in front of Nathan, probably in an effort to make him jealous or to force him to not want to leave her side, especially considering that shortly after this, Nathan would stop working, claiming that he was suffering from severe pain due to his fibromyalgia. Could this be true? 100% this could be true. But people in his life beg to differ, and they say that prior to Shauna, Nathan was completely fine, going to work and making a life for himself despite the fibromyalgia. Nathan and Shauna continued to date, and Shauna and Nathan would end up welcoming their first child shortly thereafter and go on to raise him or her, the baby. They would go on to raise the baby in public housing. When Becky turned 15, she began dating a boy by the name of Luke. Angie and Darren actually really liked Luke. He was very good to Becky, and he was very respectful to her as well as to Angie and Darren. When Becky turned 16, she had a conversation with Angie about wanting to have sex for the first time. But by the time she had left that conversation with Angie, she decided that she would prefer to wait a little bit longer to engage in those kinds of activities, and she realized that she was in no way ready for that. In 2013, Darren and Angie decided that it was finally time for them to get married. Nathan was the best man, Becky was the bridesmaid, and Shauna, who was the mother of Angie and Darren's grandchild, at the time was the other bridesmaid. Because Shauna was only 14 when the two began dating, Nathan would be the one that would teach her about sex. The two of them would engage in sexual fantasies, and it was enjoyed by both parties, allegedly. As time went on, Nathan began talking about having a threesome, and at one point they actually approached a friend about this, but the friend turned them down. Becky, who was 16 years old at the time, was right around the age that Nathan preferred. The two would begin to fantasize about kidnapping Becky, but as time went on, the conversation would turn more and more serious. Tuesday, February 17th, 2015. Danny would come home from work late at night. He walked into Becky's room and he found her laying on her bed watching TV. A little while later, around 10 p.m., Becky would find her father in the garden smoking a cigarette and ask him to make her a frozen pizza and some garlic bread. So, a few years prior to this, Becky had an extremely severe eating disorder that was actually brought on by a lot of bullying. A disorder that was so bad that there were nights that her father would have to carry her up the stairs because she didn't have the energy to make it up the steps on her own. She had come such a long way since those days, so anytime Becky asked for any kind of food, no matter the hour, Darren and Angie were more than happy to oblige. They were just happy that Becky was eating and that she was getting healthy because she was like skeleton thin. He smiled at Becky, told her to go upstairs, and said he would bring it to her when he was done. A little while later, he walked into Becky's room with her food on a tray and a tea towel on his arm as if he was like her waiter. Never knowing that this would be the last time he would ever talk to his baby girl again. He said goodnight, turned around, and left. Then around 3 o'clock in the morning, he woke up and he hears Becky's TV on. So he creeps quietly down the hall, walks into her room, sees Becky sleeping peacefully, grabs her remote, whispers to himself, "How on earth can you sleep with this bloody thing blaring?" Turns off the TV and goes back to bed. The next morning, Wednesday, February 18th, 2015, Darren gets up and leaves for work very early before anybody's even awake. When he arrives home that night, Angie tells him that Becky had decided to sleep at her girlfriend's house for the night. No big deal. Thursday, February 19th, 2015 at 8:30 a.m., Angie would hear Becky banging on the door telling her that she forgot her key. So after letting Becky inside, she says hi to Angie and she goes up to her room. Around 11 o'clock, Angie's mother picks her up to take her to a doctor's appointment. So Angie had developed multiple sclerosis years earlier. In short, MS is a disease that affects the immune system by eating away the protective covering of the nerves. It damages the communication between the brain and the body. Angie was first diagnosed years earlier when she went to bed one night completely normal and she woke up blind. Like, woke up the next morning completely blind. I can't even, oh my God. And I've heard that before. Like, this is not the first time that I've heard of that, and that's even scarier, I think. But her vision would end up coming back later on, just to be clear. So there are actually multiple symptoms of MS and multiple severity levels as well. Some of the lucky ones can live symptom-free while others cannot. Angie was not one of the lucky ones. At 12:45, Angie returns home and finds Nathan, Shauna, and the baby at the house. They're sitting on the couch just playing on their phones. When Angie asks about Becky, the two inform her that she had left, but that they didn't know where she went. Shauna claims that while she was out back in the garden smoking a cigarette, she heard the door slam. She says that she just assumed it was Becky having one of her tantrums and stomping out. Where she went was anyone's guess according to them. But Angie didn't think too much of it at first because she was a 16-year-old girl after all, right? And we've all been, 16-year-olds. A little while later, Becky's boyfriend Luke comes by and tells Angie that he and Becky had plans to hang out and that Becky wasn't answering any of his calls or any of his texts, and that this was not like Becky at all. Angie actually wasn't overly concerned at first, and she just assumed that, she was with her girlfriends, maybe her phone died, maybe she was busy, but she assured him that as soon as she talks to her, she will tell her to call him. Friday, February 20th, 2015. The family of Becky Watts begins to become a little concerned now about Becky's whereabouts. Angie calls Darren at work because at this point now, nobody has seen her or heard from her. So Angie calls Darren at work and tells him that Becky is missing and that he needs to come home. When he arrives home, he finds Angie, Nathan, Shauna, Becky's boyfriend Luke, and Becky's two best girlfriends in the home. Darren goes to Becky's room with her girlfriends, and they, just to check things out, see if anything's off. So they realize that Becky's phone, her iPad, and her laptop are missing, but no clothes are missing, no makeup's missing, and no overnight bag is gone. That's huge to a teenage girl, whether you want to believe it or not. Yes, I get the phone and the laptop and everything, but the clothes and the makeup and stuff, that's also huge to a teenage girl. There was also no social media activity on her accounts within the last 2 days. So the family calls the police, who didn't initially take it seriously at first.
My daughter's gone missing. No one has seen her, no? No. We phoned around the family. All her friends have contacted her asking where she is, and none of them know. What's her name? Rebecca what?
It would even take them a few hours to show up to the home. Saturday, February 21st, 2015. By now, even the cops are becoming concerned. When they got to the home, they asked Darren if they could look around and if they could take DNA samples from things such as like Becky's toothbrush. Darren was so distraught at this time. He was just like, whatever. Just do whatever you want. Take whatever you want. Just whatever you have to do. Just find my kid. Police in the community would come out in the hundreds to search for Becky and to hand out flyers with her picture on it. The community of St. George was extremely close, and they were going to do anything that they could to help Becky, because the way they looked at it, Becky could have been any one of their children or their grandchildren. So they were going to do what they could to find this little girl. February 23rd, 2015, Darren would take to Facebook and he would plead for Becky to come home, saying, "Bex, if you can see this, please come home. We're heartbroken. We need you in our lives. You won't be told off, and you can make as much mess as you want, and I won't say a word. Promise." Oh my God. February 25th, 2015. Darren and Angie do an interview begging for whoever has Becky to please return her.
If you can see this, get in contact. And if anyone out there knows something, just tell us. Just bring her home safe. If you've got her, then put her somewhere we can find her. We want her home, please.
It was also on this day that Darren would take to Facebook and make an emotional plea to the wives, mothers, and girlfriends in the area, saying, "It was my baby girl's time of the month, so if you have washed any blood from your partner's or son's underwear and they can't explain it, please imagine if this was your child. What would you do? Please report it." This is just desperation. This is just complete and utter desperation. Days later, detectives would ask Darren and Becky to leave the home so that they could perform some forensic tests at the residence. Saturday, February 28th, 2015. Darren and Angie are told that Nathan and Shauna are being questioned in regards to the disappearance of Becky. What puzzled police was that nobody had come forward to say that they had seen Becky that day, and after the two claimed that she had stomped out the door, and there was no CCTV footage that picked up a single sighting of Becky that day, leading police to determine that Becky most likely never actually left the house. Tuesday, March 3rd, 2015. Everything for Darren and Angie would change forever. Police call Darren to let him know that they have found the body of Becky in a shed at number 9 Barton Court. The home belonged to a couple named Carl Demetrius and Jaden Parsons. The police went on to tell Darren that they compared the DNA from the body to the DNA that was collected from Becky's toothbrush. And without mincing words, it's her. But it doesn't stop there. Becky was found in 8 separate bags inside of the couple's shed, and Carl Demetrius was a friend of Nathan Matthews. When they searched the apartment of Nathan and Shauna, they would find a receipt that for the day after Becky went missing. On the receipt, it would be items such as a circular saw, gloves, goggles, and a face mask. CCTV from the store would show Nathan purchasing these items. Along with this, Nathan and Shauna were seen on a separate store CCTV after Becky went missing, buying a big amount of cleaning supplies. Police also noticed that the home of Nathan and Shauna was a complete mess. It was disgusting, except for the bathroom. Their bathroom happened to be spotless, more specifically, half of their bathroom. The bathtub portion of their bathroom was spotless. Nathan and Shauna's apartment was so gross that they even had like a toaster oven and like a mini fridge in their bedroom so that they wouldn't have to get out of bed if they wanted to eat or drink. When police searched Darren and Angie's house, they found blood evidence on Becky's on the door frame to Becky's bedroom. And when the blood was tested, it was determined that it belonged to Becky. They also found fingerprints inside of the blood. And the fingerprint would end up belonging to Becky's stepbrother, Nathan. They would later tell Darren that Nathan and Shauna had been arrested for the murder of Becky due to a confession letter that was given by Nathan through his lawyer that read, I, Nathan Charles Matthews, accepts that I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts on the 19th of February, 2015. I attended the Crown Hill, St. George, Bristol with my girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. In my car, I had a large bag, stun gun, handcuffs, tape, and mask. I had developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to scare her and teach her a lesson. I believed that she was selfish and her behavior towards my mother was a risk to my mother's health. A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted a cigarette and went into the garden. I went to the boot of my car, took out a bag that contained the items, then went upstairs to the landing before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, "What?" or "Hello," and I said, "Can I see you a minute?" I cannot be sure which order things happened, but I used the items I had to subdue Rebecca. During the short struggle, my mask slipped, and Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic, and while her face was partially in a bag. 16-year-old Becky Watts was suffocated in her room. Then she was placed into a suitcase and put into the trunk of Nathan's car. After they put Rebecca in the trunk, they went back into the house. They ordered Chinese food. They Googled this parody song on YouTube, a parody of Frozen's Do You Want to Build a Snowman? And it's called Do You Want to Hide a Body? And then they played Monopoly without a care in the world. When Nathan was 16, he dropped out of his second year at Bristol College. After this, he would decide to become an Army cadet. Later on, he would join the Territorial Army. It was here that he would learn quite a bit of skills that he would use to kill Becky. Things such as weapons training, lessons in decontamination, more specifically, a powder that is used by soldiers to absorb liquid. This powder is often found in cat litter. When Nathan and Shauna got home that night, they brought Becky inside. They placed her in the bathtub, and Nathan stabbed her 15 times in the stomach, claiming that he believed that this would make her body fluids come out. She was then cut into 8 pieces. From there, she was wrapped in plastic wrap and she was put into bags. Cat litter was also found on the body parts of Becky in an attempt to prevent moisture decomposing and smelling. This is why the bathtub was so incredibly clean, and the rest of the house, including the other half of the bathroom, was such a disgusting mess. But to their credit, that sounds terrible, but there was nothing left behind. Meanwhile, neither one of them work all day. So what the fuck do you do all day? So actually, why doesn't your whole fucking house look like that? What the hell do you do all day? Neither one of you work. Clearly, you guys know how to clean. Well, take the fucking same energy and put it to the rest of the rooms in this house. And there's a baby that lives there. And Shauna's pregnant with their second baby. Nathan would claim that he never meant to kill Becky, that he just wanted to scare her because he was sick and tired of Becky disrespecting his mother. Maybe that was true. She was a teenage girl. So, could that be true? Absolutely. Does that make it okay? Absolutely not. It'll come out in trial from one of Becky's best friends, a girl by the name of Courtney Bicker. She would testify that before Becky's death, Becky confided in her that Nathan told Becky in detail how he would kill her. It would also come out that day when Nathan and Shauna were at the house, when they ordered the Chinese food and they played the parody song and they played Monopoly. When Angie walked past Nathan's car and when Darren walked past Nathan's car to go into their home, they were walking past Becky's body in a suitcase in the trunk, and they had no idea. They had no clue. When he walked up the driveway to his house, he was walking right past his daughter's body, and he had no idea. Even worse than that, they did it on Becky's brother, her brother Danny. They did it on Danny's 21st birthday. Carl Demetrius and Jaden Parsons, who were the couple that were paid, money, apparently a huge amount of money. But I don't know if it's a huge amount. They were paid money to let Nathan store stuff in their shed. Or specifically 8 bags of body parts, but that's besides the point. They claim that they did not know what was in the bags. They pled guilty to assisting an offender. Carl Demetrius would be sentenced to 2 years in prison, and Jaden Parsons would be sentenced to 16 months. In October of 2015, Shauna Hoare was charged with manslaughter. They were able to prove that Shauna's DNA was found on a face mask that was in the shed, along with her DNA being found on one of the bags. So this proved that she was part of the cleanup and the cut up, but it didn't actually prove that Becky. So because of that, she was charged with manslaughter. She was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Nathan Matthews was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years.
What for you would mean justice for Becky?
Him dead.
In November of 2015, shortly after Shauna was sentenced, the Daily Mail reported that Shauna Hoare had plans to marry her new lesbian girlfriend, arsonist Bernie Chance. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. Whether or not they followed through with it, I don't know, and I don't care. Here's what I do care about. I care very much about this. On September 1st, 2023, Becky's biological mother, Tanya, wrote a post that read, "Good morning, everyone. Just to let you know that Shauna Hoare has been released this morning, as I expected. Spread the word if you can, please, people, for Becky Watts, our Bristol angel. Thank you, Tanya." That's only 8 years. That's only 8 years. Tanya Watts would also say she's not even 30. She's got her whole life ahead of her, and she's got a future. Whereas when we talk to our daughter, we're talking to the ground. I don't want her to feel like she's free to walk down the street without a care in the world. After what she did, I think she's cold and evil. She is. The worst thing for me is that Becky trusted her, and what eats away at me is when I remember all those times when I would ring Becky and Shauna would answer, and she was so sweet, and for a few seconds, sometimes, I would mistake her for Becky. Becky liked her and trusted her, and she betrayed Becky's trust. And it's hard when I think of how she smiled at the camera in the police station when she was arrested. All right, guys, if you're still here, thank you. I love you, and I appreciate you so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet. Please. Leave me your thoughts. I'm dying to know them. I love talking to you guys. And until next time, stay safe out there.
What do I eat first?
It could have gone very differently.
I know, just have a nice big mouthful of,
Why a big
got over our differences.
well, that's a lot of rice.
I've made homemade vanilla ice cream, and I'm going to pop it in my little
Right
beef
now?
bucket.
It's really hot anyway because of the microwave.
Guernsey double milk. It is.
I want a drink ready.
No, it's fine.
Dad, don't! I'm taking half of this.
I want to take you guys to the beach, and before you go to the beach, we all need.
It's easy.
I thought it was a really nice touch when Gemma presented
Might be
this
slightly red,
and
isn't
we
it?
all had to wear sunglasses.
Oh, look at this, Dad.
Take some out.
Going red.
Little bit of fish. You can't go to the beach. There we go. Stuck in.
I thought
Fucking easy.
that Gemma prepared was amazing, looked brilliant and tasted even better. Oh, it's brilliant. It was
Gonna have a go at the chili, yeah?
It's hurting my heart, I'll be honest.
But then everything else you served with it was coming out of that year.
on the pudding, but it's got them talking about the island.
I think possibly people here, it would be safe to say, are a little bit backwards.
You're planning on leaving us?
Not my
I can't pick it up, Dad.
people in Guernsey are quite stubborn, but I guess that's why they call us the Guernsey donkey.
And this evening, that's why we're the wonky donkeys.
I'll tell that every time.
The wonky donkeys, yay! The standard of food this week has been really high. I just hope I've done enough to actually clinch it and win it.
I am cocky, I am arrogant, but as I've proven, you don't need experience to succeed.
I would love to think that I could win it based on what I've done today. I've put absolutely everything I had into that.
The food was amazing. I felt really special, so I'm going to give her a 9.
Tonight, I thought the menu was exciting.
I don't even know fucking
It
food.
didn't quite come together for me, so I'm going to give Gemma a 7.
That puts Gemma on 16. She needs an 8 from arch rival Ben to beat him and win.
Tonight, I'm going to give Gemma...
Stop right there, Sonny Jim. We'll find out tonight's winner together. Why are you looking so
I'm dying, Dad. I'm dying. Can I leave the rest of that?
No, this is your tea.
No, a bit of chili.
It's freezing out here.
Can't breathe, Dad. Can't breathe.
Fourth place, we have the one and only Mike. In third place,
Half of me.
Oh.
excuse me, sunshine. Young Linda going to take you home for the team.
Right, gonna believe me now? When I say it's hot, it's hot.
It's the chili, Dad. It's the chili.
What's this?
I'm still gonna finish it, so do you?
I don't think we got that much milk.
Huh?
We've only got like 14 pints of milk. That ain't gonna be enough for you.
Anything that makes it worse.
For the benefit of Guernsey, that Ben lost this other one we would have
I can't breathe, Dad. It hurts. It hurts my ears.
Is it burning your ears?
fairness, I think Gemma
Oh,
put the most
yeah.
effort in out of everyone. I obviously managed to live a great night without much effort.
Time for Benny Buys, Ben.
Is it burning the back of your eyes yet?
It hurts.
Now, or if you're out and about, download it to your smartphone or tablet and watch it on the go. And overlooked and undervalued, the penthouse agendas actually work to see what they're made of. Mary's Silver Service, a brand new series starts tonight at 8. Next today, The Simpsons.
Okay, I'll do it.
3 raw eggs, 2 field mushrooms, 1 pack of uncooked bacon. Tonight's dinner party is in safe hands. Get on no touch. Sponsors come dine with you.
Still nothing.